Well, welcome to Mystic and the Nerd. We are back again and we're doing another book. We're kind of working through my reading list. So the last one was listening to the heartbeat of Jesus, which just absolutely, I love it, recommend it time and time again. But this one I've probably recommended even more than that one. This one is, the author is Gene Edwards. He's, the last couple of years, he went to heaven. um, I actually tried to contact him to see if I could interview him for my podcast, and I'd missed him by a couple of months. And he's now hanging out with Jesus in a pretty powerful way. But he is the writer of many books. And this book was given to me, I think it was in COVID. One of my friends from Haberfield, the wonderful Tracy French, sent me this book, or she left, because back then you weren't allowed to have any connections, so they couldn't come in. But this book turned up on in my letterbox, and she said, "Thought you might enjoy this one." Well, not only did I enjoy it, I read it, reread it, read it again, given my sacred copy away to Lana Engelbrecht, and trust that that's in good care with the white gloves and all that sort of stuff. And got myself another copy of The Tale of Three Kings. It's a very short read. I think you can probably read it. Knowing you, Jess, you'd probably do it at half the speed that I do, but I was a couple of hours. It takes me to read a book like this, which sounds crazy fast, but it's all big print and there's not a lot of words on each page, but it's a beautiful allegory. And it inspired me for the Eagle series that I'm doing. It's a beautiful allegory on Saul, King David, and King Absalom. So the tale of three kings. Love it. How you doing, Jess?
So good. We set out to record a podcast on this book years ago, and it didn't happen.
Hmm.
It's a full circle moment, I feel. So I'm doing great. I'm excited that we're finally here, Matt. And
Well,
likewise,
Jess,
I was excited to talk about this book because you recommended it and I
yeah.
devoured it. It's such a quick read. But you don't want to read it too fast because every page is so rich in
Mm.
the story, allegory, like you said, amazing.
Yep. He's done a few of them in this. Well, he's done a bunch of them in this sort of allegory process, but this one in particular, um, I just have super enjoyed it. What was your first takeaway when you read it, Jess? Like, what were you, like, you read it the first time? Like, what was going on in through your spirit then?
Yeah, I was wrecked. I was so wrecked by this book. I think that's why we ended up not recording on it because it wrecked me so much. The second I tried to talk about it, I'd just be weeping. It wasn't something I was eager to go and unpack up because it spoke so much into many of the seasons of my life, the things I had kind of journeyed through. And like you shared last time that we met around the other book that we got to discuss, just the healing nature when you find a book that really puts words around your experience or your world, and yeah, you can glean from it, learn from it, but really, I found so much of it relatable and positively and both negatively. The parts that I love about David and his character, and just I love how the book really captures the nature of Saul versus the nature of David and asks that question of kind of what's in your heart. We don't
Mm.
even know, are we a Saul? Are we a David? Um, and the way that Saul was used ultimately to crush the Saul in David's heart. We all have a Saul in our heart. I just loved the journey the book took me on.
Yeah. Yeah, me too. It's just, yeah, there's so many parts of a very short book that speak very powerfully into spirit. And when you start this book, there's got a little preamble in it that talks about that Gene Edwards was a pastor for decades, and he kept on having people come to talk with him about spiritual abuse. And so he decided to write this particular book, this allegory around that. And I think that's what caught my attention initially, because I remember at the time, spiritual abuse in churches was such a very difficult and challenging conversation for so many people to be having. And when this little book landed in my lap, I thought, wow, this is a really timely moment. And so, like Jess is alluding to, the idea in the book is that we all have a Saul and we all have a David within us. The Saul was taught how to fight or to throw spears, and David, well, he had a different thread that was in him. He was the shepherd. He was the one who looked to build and to do all of these things. He still fought, he still won, he still overcame, and all of those things. But it looks at two different ideals of Saul and David and how they operate within us. And so often we will criticize someone and we could go, that's just like Saul. All they ever do is throw spears back at us. And then I'm not like that. I am like David. I would choose grace every single time. And the book would go, no, you won't. So
Mhm.
yeah, so it's this sort of concept that for me, it's just like it's part of my character to unpack some of those things and to see the way that I react in or respond in different places and to see those moments where, yep, I have been sore and other moments where, yep, I can actually really resonate with David. And I think, I don't know about you, Jess, but you want to be David. You want to respond like him. You want to do the things of David. And all of a sudden you go, oh, it's just Saul in that moment. Was that your experience with this?
No, I mean, yeah, just that meta narrative kind of idea of distinguishing those two, but at the end, realizing to constantly be looking outwardly at other people and what they've done, and if they've thrown the spear, who's thrown spears at you in your life, but how did you retaliate? And I want to say it perfectly. I was like David. I dodged the spear, and I didn't throw anything back, but different chapters in my life, I can look back and say, oh, I threw I threw a couple spears back. Uh, but yeah, the challenge, I want to be like David. I want to. But you see, really, I love how Edwards unpacks this because even in the beginning, like you spoke about, let me look at it. He talks about kind of this portion of that these two destinies are given of God. And one is of power, the gift of power. And Saul takes that gift and in the second, it's not a gift, but it's an inheritance. And he writes, the inheritance is planted deep inside like a seed mixed with pain, sorrow, and crushing. So the inheritance that is David, we say, I want to be like David, but then as you look at how this unfolds with David, it's crushing, it's pain, it's running, it's caves, it's everything we want to avoid. So it's kind of that invitation into pain, and you go, no, thank you. I don't know who actually wants to throw their hand up for that. And that's the genius of this book. Because you go, no, I do want that because I think kind of what's the theme? It's that broken vessel, that God wants the broken
Mm,
vessel and understanding what that broken vessel looks like. It's not that vessel that wears it all together on the outside that we see kind of as Saul. The gift is seen on the outside, but it reveals kind of the brokenness within on the inside, the outwardly broken, it looked like in David's experience, kind of shattered life that we see him
mm,
living for so long, but actual inward transformation. And that's really the heart piece that spoke to me through this book and my own healing journey through brokenness.
mm.
Yeah, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree with you. Like the idea around the throwing spears, I think that was the very thing that captured me initially when I was reading it. Um, and I reflected on this in my own upbringing, in the way that I learned church or the model of church. And so often churches can be really painful where gossip is like a spear that's thrown.
Mhm.
And all you want to do is lash out and throw something back. And as a pastor, I'll tell you, Jess, there's been times I felt like a pincushion because it felt like it just one after the other after the other. And if you're not taught how what grace does, if you're only taught on throwing spears, you'll learn to throw them straight back. And with Australians being sarcasm is nearly like their native tongue,
Mhm.
the spear can come straight out of the mouth and hit what you need it to hit in a very abusive or painful or difficult way. And so I reading this and like you, I was crying through reading it, going, I have learned how to throw spears, not how to dodge them and care, to love, to grace. And it was such an overwhelming thought that I've even preached sermons on this idea of we've been taught how to throw spears in church, not how to care, not how to love, not how to love ourselves. And so
Mhm.
it took me on this enormous journey of discovery of why I do the things that I do, um, and what I've learned as I've grown up in Australian culture of churches, all of that sort of stuff. And a lot of that was challenging. Some of it was beautiful to understand, but it's that sort of place, like you're alluding to, where it helps you discover something more about self. And then you have the choice as to whether you do something about self or you go, no, I'm actually happy throwing spears.
And avoiding pain if I can.
Yep.
Really would love to avoid the pain.
Yep. Well, that's if you put it into like even an Eden moment, like Adam and Eve mess up and blame becomes the method of it was her fault, it was the snake's fault, it was all that sort of stuff. And that becomes like the spear. So
Mhm.
blame or shame is like the spear that people throw. And
Mm.
if that is what you know, that's what you'll throw back. Okay, if that's your defense mechanism, that's what you'll do. And if that's what you've grown up in, you actually need a transformative moment and moments to actually go, that's not the way the kingdom works. So, what does it look like? And this book has helped me unravel some of that stuff in myself to get curious more about the David ideal and how that then plays out in 21st century in the life of Matt and back in that moment in leading a church and all of that sort of stuff. How do I teach people that throwing spears is not the best version of community became one of those internal thoughts in the things that I did? So how did I create opportunities for the spears to be laid down rather than picked up?
Mhm. Well, the thing that really challenged me in this book, but paralleled what I had experienced, so yeah, I loved kind of the reframe around it, is to not judge the Sauls in our life either, or the spear throwers, because they are anointed too. And in the end, we can't judge. Only God knows the anointed purpose, because as he writes, the Sauls in this world kind of crushed the Saul's and Dave, like crushed the Saul in David's heart. Otherwise, he would have been like Saul. Or
Mm,
so it kind of stops and make you think about, yeah, what were those crushing moments where the spears crushed me? How did that transform me? How did that lead me to that
mm,
transformative experience that I'm so thankful for? Not that I'm thankful for what happened or the person that threw that spear, or whatever the circumstance is, that relationship, or but I look at the new heart that I gained from that process. And ultimately, if I was able to not throw the spear eventually back, um, the ability to walk that out and kind of how that brought me closer to God. Because I think in those places you learn relationally what it is to walk with Him and allow Him to kind of allow yourself to surrender and trust that God is going to produce something, or fight your battle for you, or something. There's always something that you learn.
yeah. Yeah. And some of it is even right to be there. Like you've been offended, you've been hurt, you've been betrayed, all
Mhm.
those kinds of things. It's not, I think half the time in churches is like, did they really say that? And we interpret it the way that we want to, and all of a sudden we're throwing spears back. And so that idea, I think, too, Jess, like even as we go through life, it's not that we're going to eradicate the Saul and only be the David. We are still human. We still get overwhelmed. We still react and respond occasionally in ways that we used to. And it's about learning in those moments. It's about discovering that even in failure, there is great benefit, there is great hope,
Mhm.
rather than just going screwed up again, back to square one. I'm useless. I'm hopeless. I'm not enough. I can't do this thing.
Mhm.
That's often what happens when you're in places of where the war is the spears going back and forward, back and forward, back and forward. And so again, for me, this opened up an opportunity for me to learn how to love myself well or
Mhm.
better.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what was similar. Just learning how to, once you pare back and peel everything back, you start at the foundation, and everything around you kind of is shaken, like in David's experience or life and journey. and you really start to find yourself. And in that place, you finally get to be the leader. I think this is a book of leadership that God has called you to be, and the inheritance that you will leave in this place, in this world. Can we talk a little bit about the actual caves, or those cave moments of David? I was looking through my notes and trying to kind of remember some of those places that really gripped me, and just creatively looking at how the author talks about David's songs of weeping and the grief that was processed in the caves, kind of being this place where David was able to compose through his tears something that would end up blessing the world for all time. These beautiful psalms that he would come that become great comforts to other people. So I was thinking of the blessing and the crushing of creativity, honestly, and the healing journey that um, the things that come from that, the fruit, the things that are created
Mm.
in those moments.
I agree. And like in those cave moments, like it reflects on the idea that David was already anointed to be king, but here he is with a band of outlaws a long way away from Samuel going, here's the next king of Israel, right? And it's like you say, it's those hopes that get crushed at times in our lives where we think I wanted to do things different or better, or I believe God said this about me, and look, how am I in this time or season of life? And all of a sudden you're reading this thing about David who's slayed Goliath, and now he's saved Israel, and now he's on the run from effectively the army of Israel, Saul, and hiding in caves. And it just, I don't know, when I read it, there was this beautiful humility that you could read through it. Whether David went into that cave with humility, but it seems as though when he came out of that cave, humility was a very big part of the conversation of, okay, what's about to happen next? And you know that verse in Proverbs where it says, "Don't lean on your own understanding, but trust in the ways of the Lord." Like you can actually see that playing out in David's life, where it's like, I don't know what's ahead of me. I know what God said about me, and I'm pretty
Mhm.
happy about that. And it was like he was able to stay in the presence and allow him to operate from that place. And that's where I think for me why presence is such a big deal too. Um, and sometimes we're just I'm so far in the future that I've lost those moments of what is God doing today.
Mhm. Yeah. If I ask you this question from the book, tell me how you'd respond. It says, what does this world need? Gifted men and women outwardly empowered, or individuals who are broken, inwardly transformed?
Yeah, I'd be going with option B, but I think the church model's option A a lot.
Yeah. And why do you think that's what we're prone to? Because this just seems to be a reoccurring theme of the typical leaders that we try to empower and follow.
I think for the main, we want leaders with no defects. And if when a leader without defect shows that there is no defect in the community, supposedly. And I know that's a massive generalization, but look at our political leaders. We want them without defects. The leaders of our businesses, we want them without defects. And as soon as one gets caught out with a defect, all of a sudden, we it's it's all over. Like it's
Mhm.
done. And we've seen it in churches, we've seen it in business, we've seen it in politics. We've seen it on the school playground. It's the same principle over and over again, and that's the throwing spears idea. As soon as we find the defect, we throw the spear, we hurt, we wound, and all of a sudden we're not talking about that person anymore, not seeing that person anymore, and not even wondering where they have gone.
Mhm.
Option B is understanding that we all have defects, and if that's a thing, could we have grace to understand that? Could we have grace to walk with that person inside of that? Now, it's easy to say that when you don't have all the details, but when you do, that's where the challenges of grace come. And that's effectively, Jess, the story of my life.
Mhm. Yeah, I agree with that 100%. I think after you've, I think it just takes that experiential knowledge to really, for me, to kind of to see people in those weaknesses. although it can be shattering for community, it can be shattering for, yourself personally if you are following or you have a leader in your life that shows a failure of some kind. It does affect a community. But if you can walk with that person through their own transformation, I think that is for the betterment of the community to actually see that modeled. So then because we all need that, we all need to go on that journey to find our own healing in many ways. So my ideal concept of a leader is really embracing this inwardly transformed. I want to know your journey. I want to know what you've overcome or where you're at or what you're struggling with. I want to see that authenticity and that vulnerability. If it's missing in a community or a leader, that's when I start to have more questions and just curiosities of where that person might be.
Well, I just think that that to me, and again with the story of my own journey of complete breakdown to restoration, like the church communities want their leader to, if they put their faith in that person and that person chooses makes poor choices, all of a sudden faith belief can be very, very challenging because all their faith has gone into that one person.
Mhm.
Um, the thing I love about David in the story of the Bible, we get to see him from youth all the way through to dying. We get to see good choices, we get to see poor choices. And some of those poor choices are things that we would completely cancel people from their roles or ministries in today's day and age. And we look back and we go, oh, he saw Bathsheba bathing on the house next door. And like if a pastor got caught out doing that these days, he would lose his job immediately. And would we hear from him again? Probably not. So why do we romanticize David's journey? We shouldn't. We should talk about it in its authentic realism that it gives to us in this sort of place. But often history will have us looking back with rose-colored glasses.
Mhm.
People were affected. People put their faith in him. People believed for better for him. And a lot of them couldn't understand it. Even his own son in Absalom couldn't understand what it looked like for a wounded man to be healed.
Mhm.
And so that to me has been part of the model of, if I can sit with a person and they're willing to share with me their woundedness, there is a very bright future for that person as we walk together in relationship.
Mhm. Because I think being able to uncover those wounds, I think that is a such an act of courage and strength,
Mm,
especially in the leader. So if you see someone take that courageous step forward of kind of unveiling those things, and it just creates courage for others to do the same. I think that is the most powerful way we testify really to
mm,
that transformative love of Jesus and not being afraid to share those things. But yeah, we haven't made that a safe place for most leaders in our church and in communities. I know in my
mm,
own in my own story, trying to find safety to connect with people when I was really struggling. I've just found a lot of people challenged by hearing it. I didn't find it that people really want to entertain it when you're really struggling
mm.
sometimes for whatever reason. Maybe they don't have the capacity, or if people are used to seeing you in a different light or a really positive, happy-go-lucky light, then, suddenly you're switched off and people are like, no, get over that thing. Just let's, go back to being you and whatever. But yeah, I think there's many challenges with that as well.
Hmm, I agree.
So I've just kind of been thinking about just the difference of Saul and David, just biblically speaking in their stories. So what do you look at in really Saul's leadership that makes him so different in the way that maybe he even was relational with God, or just his spirit, his his spirit life?
It's interesting, Jess, because I actually connect a lot with Saul's character. Dude's insecure.
Mhm.
And he starts off the conversation with Samuel like, I'm the wrong guy. Like nearly a Moses moment of going, least tribe, least family. Um, like, why on earth would you be? I'm just here looking for my donkeys, for goodness sake. Like, what's going on? Um, and you have this. like it's a thread that goes through Saul's life where um, the insecurities of his world often will become the very thing that become the conversations that we see played out inside of it. So if David gets bigger and stronger and harder and faster, um, Saul gets insecure because he wonders how this is actually going to be a thing that's going to be helpful for his own kingship. And so I see so much of my world inside of that. Yeah.
Had to mute for a second while my dog barks. Thank you for that insight. I agree with that. I really have a lot of compassion for Saul's character, so this isn't to pick on him as a and his shortcomings or failures. It's really to, for me, challenge myself to see Saul in me at the end. Um, but I am drawn, I guess, to that story of just looking at how much not only did David seem to walk with the Lord, or his heart was just always and his ear was always bent towards him. Not that he didn't do these things like you mentioned, or murder is also on his hands, but this idea of not only how much did David enjoy the Lord, but how much the Lord enjoyed David. Um, just some more things I look at in the Bible. Like you started this, I want to be like David. And in the end, I'm looking for those markers in this book and in the scripture where I just love David's character. Learn from Saul's, definitely identify with Saul, but
Hmm.
relationally, just that drawing near God, that submission, patience that David seemed to walk in.
Yeah, I agree with that. Like, and I think in my journey in life, the concept of David always wanting to be with God, hear from God, lean into God. What are you saying here, God? That's become more my model. Ever since I started doing prophetic mentoring, that's become the thing where I just want to hear what God's got to say on something rather than what everyone else has said on something or what I've always interpreted on something. I've just been so keen for it. And that's the mystic that's in me. I want to hunt for spiritual things that I want to encounter, that I want to experience. And I wonder, even with David, I think David was a beautiful mystic in the idea of it. Like he was the bard, the songwriter, the shepherd. His experiences came from slaying lions and bears and things like that. And he learned things of God in those sorts of environments where Christian world today would encourage you to sit quietly in churches and listen for that. I love that David's out there with it. And that for me has become very much a part of who I am today, where I want to learn, I want to grow, I want to listen, I want to discover more of God.
All right, if you could go back and pick your story. I don't know, kind of like the beginning of this book. It almost seems like you pick your destiny, but anyway, uh, there is kind of that idea of the making that happens, the completeness, the whole, whatever Dave, the becoming that David experiences is through the crushing. If you could choose to go through those moments and glean or learn or become who you are today with what you carry today because of those things, or remove them altogether, what would you pick?
I guess it's the impossible question. Just like if you could go back, what would you do differently, or what would you choose? Like, I just know that my life and cave experiences, there I can identify them very clearly. Like Eden's blueprint was written uh, predominantly from healing in one of those cave experiences. Would I swap it? Well, I'd love to have gone back and made way different choices than I ever made back in the day, and that would have saved me a lot of pain for a long time. But what I've learned about myself in those cave experiences could not replace that, could not change that. I am the person I am today because of the choices that I've made, and some of those choices were to remain in the cave to heal, to find myself, to discover myself, in all of those things. I love the idea that I'm never ever going to be a complete David in its sense, because we are human and we do wrestle with thoughts, behaviors, old patterns, and things like that. But for me, there's such a beauty of finding a person in a cave
Mhm.
and allowing them to be them without judgment, without shame. So yeah, that's probably my take on it. Did that answer your question at all, Jess?
Yeah, I think so. And I think I only ask it because most often when I have these kind of conversations with people through the crushing of their lives, you kind of stop and you go, it destroyed me at the time. And in the book, I think it's like David was unrecognizable at the end. It almost takes your
Mm,
life, to a
mm,
point. And I don't want to ever go through that again. I don't wish it on any human, but what I transformed into or became because of it is something that's irreplaceable. And I'm so thankful for it. It's some of the greatest things that I am most constantly thanking God for what I learned of myself. Or like you said, that just learning to love yourself. And you go, man, I don't know the great mystery of this world and of God and God's ways or how it all works. But I go, as I wish there were other ways to go through it, the fires. But
mm.
the transformation that takes place, I think, for me is worth it. I wouldn't, if I could pick, I wouldn't do it over or change it.
Yeah. I think one of the things too, like the whole idea of healing, even in the book, healing for David happened in community. It didn't happen in isolation. And one of my favorite parts of the entire book, in chapter 17, where a young soldier goes and interviews one of David's mighty men and asks him the question, what made David such a good leader? And the mighty man laughed. He said he wasn't a good leader. He was insecure. He cried. He wept, and all of that. But he showed me. He showed me what vulnerability or authenticity looked like.
Mhm.
It's a humorous chapter, but it's also for me it's like an absolute powerful mic drop chapter of the entire book because it gave to me a beautiful insight of a fractured human who was healing in a place where the people around him mattered as well. And so he cared for the people that were around him, even to the point where the people around him were telling David, kill Saul, take the palace, do the things, and we don't have to live in this cave anymore. I wonder how many people have short circuited that cave experience to get out and found that they can't do the things without the experiences that they've needed to learn or the 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 lessons they've needed to walk through, and David was willing to wait for the lesson. And so from that one chapter, there's a phrase in it which it's not in the book, but it's one that I've really coined for this whole book was what I learn in the caves will help me when I'm walking in the palaces. Um, but don't rush the cave. You can't rush the cave. It's these are the things I think for the kingdom of God in places of healing in community, in person, in self, that are so needed in today's church as well.
Mhm. And I think I was sharing with you a little before, one of my favorite pages is just kind of an interesting take on division and how David, even in those moments where he could have easily divided this kingdom, he
Mm,
didn't. And he waited and surrendered. And that's that kind of patience thing. And it just reminds me of community and how we walk through this brokenness together or the caves in our lives or the disappointments in our lives, betrayals in our lives, whatever it is, the broken system, all of it. At the end of the day, how God honors unity over division. And
mm,
that's his design. So, what part do I play in that, in community, in healing, and wholeness, and togetherness? And what am I responsible for in those moments? Yeah.
mm. Yeah.
Anything else as we kind of wrap up?
No, there's lots to the book, and we could obviously talk another whole session on even going into the man that is Absalom that's inside of this, and the idea of rebellion inside of a of a person's life or inside of a community or whatever that is. It's just such a helpful book to understand grace
Mhm.
and to give you a lens on what it looks like to do this thing of the kingdom through a different model. Um, and it helped me rest, Jess. Like
Yeah.
uh, helped me like even lower my expectations. You know, when you have expectations in friendship and relationship and church and all that sort of stuff, and it's not that you shouldn't expect to be loved or all that sort of stuff, but you know what? Fractured people hurt, and I'm fractured. Like, and there's things in me healing, and there's reactions in me.
Mm.
Um, I look for friends that can help me through those moments, even if I throw a spear. I never intend to hurt, but there's times where that sort of thing happens, and I look for those friendships to heal in and with.
Yeah. Yep. Same. I love how you worded that. Like I said, it just kind of this book reframes really the way I do relationship and um, looking inwardly and avoiding spears, but also having grace for when I throw them or get hit by one, whatever it is. Great. It's so great. So I look forward
Mm,
to, our listeners maybe jumping on board and reading this. I'd love to hear some thoughts, takeaways.
yeah, absolutely. Well, for everyone watching along, this is the Mystic and the Nerd. Thank you for hanging out with us. We will be back some more sometime soon.